Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the first season of the terrific and absolutely tremendous horror anthology series, and one of my all-time favorite works of media in general, and my pick for my favorite television show of all time, Tales from the Crypt. And of course, I can't talk about Tales from the Crypt without mentioning some key aspects of the series that were continual aspects of the show as it would go on for not just this season, but for many other seasons. You got the intro to the series, which featured a really terrific and amazing miniature by Boss Film Studios, coupled with the just incredible and dynamic and just really fun theme song by Danny Elfman, which is quite the earworm. And then you got the Crypt Keeper himself, who, in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, is the star of the series. Voiced by John Kassir, who got the part because he just created a whole voice off the top of his head, and it impressed everybody involved when it comes to the audition enough that they gave him the role on the spot. And John Kassir, to me, like, he's the perfect fit for the Crypt Keeper. And I will admit, though, his work here, I'm not as big of a fan of as his work in the later seasons. And the reason for that is that it's a lot slower. And I know some people like it more because it's more sinister, but I think Crypt Keeper works the best when he's more of kind of like the fun ghoul that you want to have like a beer with. Like, I think that's the better tone for the character. The sinister tone doesn't really work as well because it makes the comedy not really as funny. It kind of hurts the line delivery. And so what you get here is just kind of a more understated performance. It's still good, but you can tell that John is still trying to figure out how he really wants to play this character. And also he's working around limitations of the puppet because they hadn't quite perfected the puppet work at this time. So that's why the Crypt Keeper's a little slower, but it's still good. It's still something that really makes the show stand out in a good way. And of course, another thing is the puppet work itself by Kevin Yeager and company, with a little bit of Chucky, because Kevin Yeager used some Chucky parts to create the Crypt Keeper, specifically Chucky's eyes. And you can definitely see that when you watch this show and you see the Crypt Keeper interact with his audience. I've always loved the design of the Crypt Keeper. I think it's just a great looking design, and I think Yeager outdid himself with it. And get some good practical effects as well throughout this season from various different effects artists, as well as throughout the series as a whole. I think K&B at one point would actually get involved with the series. Now, the first episode of the series is The Man Who Was Death. Now, that wasn't initially the plan. The plan actually was to have An All Through the House be the first episode, but they decided to make it the second instead of the first. And I can kind of see why. This is a good episode to just kind of give people a taste of what's to come, not necessarily give you the whole full course meal. Like, it's a good appetizer. And it's a pretty solid first outing for the series overall. It's not one of my personal favorite episodes, but it's still quite effective. It still works for what it is. It's directed by Walter Hill, and a big reason why it is at all effective is really due to Walter Hill's involvement. This is Walter in his prime, so he's got that signature style and that grit and that hue that made his filmmaking just stand out so much. And so you get a lot of that with how he shoots this episode, with the lighting and with the different sort of camera angles, and it's just a really well directed episode. And it makes sense. You got Walter Hill in his prime behind the camera, so you're definitely going to get a good looking final product. And I do feel the script as well by Hill and Robert Renaud. I feel that's also something that also helps this episode click for the most part, because This is one of those episodes that isn't really a horror episode. I think the best episodes on average of this series are the ones that are based on comics from the Tales from the Crypt series, not from other EC Comics series like Shock Suspense Stories. Like there's an exception to the rule, but like the best ones are from Tales from the Crypt or Vault of Horror that deal with more traditional horror themes and aspects. This is more of like a crime story, but it still works rather well because of the quality of the direction and the quality of the screenplay, because this is a very uh different kind of script. It's very heavily relying upon fourth wall breaking, and I think if the script was lesser quality, then this wouldn't work as well because it would come across as forced and inauthentic. But because of the fact that the script is handled really well, these moments where the lead Niles Talbot, the episode's antagonist and protagonist all in one, speaks to the camera, those moments actually work very well and add to the episode in a multitude of different ways. It just makes it stand out in a good way because these are unique aspects of storytelling that are executed very well. And it also does a decent job making you think about the death penalty, especially when it comes to all these different victims that Niles targets and ultimately electrocutes himself because he's no longer able to pull the switch on these criminals because there was a law that was made where now it's illegal to kill people with the electric chair. And because of the fact that he doesn't really know how to do anything else and he's stubborn, he just decides, I'm just gonna do it from now on. If I can't do it as my job, well, I'm just gonna do it anyway. And he goes to these trials and essentially stalks these people who he feels are guilty and have been let off due to a technicality or some of these other circumstances, and then decides to take the law into his own hands and electrocutes them in various different ways. And there's a certain uniqueness as well when it comes to the various different ways he electrocutes these people. So it's not just all one way that he does it. Like with Jimmy Flood, he electrocutes them with some kind of setup involving a metal fence. And with the other the couple who got away with murder, he electrocutes them in a hot tub. And then the go-go dancer, who is his next target, that he ultimately is not able to electrocute because he gets caught in the end. Uh, he was going to electrocute her in her go-go dancing cage. So there's a good amount of variety when it comes to electrocutions. The way that those sequences are handled, I'm not gonna say it's tasteful, but it's also not like really bloody and kind of over the top. It's a little more grounded in reality, which kind of makes some of those sequences even more unsettling, especially the sequences involving the prisoners when they're electrocuted. Um, and I like the way that there are certain callbacks where, like in the first part of the episode, there's the prisoner who's saying that the governor's gonna call, and then in the finale, in the end of the episode, Talbot is the one that's screaming that the governor's gonna call. You just wait. And I like that. I like that about the script, how there's like different connections, different threads that occur throughout the episode. But honestly, the best parts of the episode is the dialogue. I think it's very charming, despite how messed up the subject matter is, and it really gives a lot for William Sadler to sink his teeth into and really chew up the scenery. And it leads to some really fun bits and some great moments of character acting for William Sadler. You know, lines like, "You treat queens like whores and whores like queens, and they'll be on their backs faster than son of sand." You know, uh, I thought that that was yeah, it's messed up in terms of the subject matter, but just the way that it's written, it's fun. It's got a certain fun, demented charm to it, and yeah, overall, it's definitely a solid screenplay when it comes to the man who was Death. Um, Now, the cast is also a really good thing when it comes to this episode. Mainly, though, William Sadler, because he's the one that is the star of the show. Like, he's the main attraction here, and I thought he was awesome. This was before Bogus Journey. This is before him really starting to take a bit of a foothold when it comes to like being a well-known and go-to character actor in the industry. So it was really nice to see him flex his muscle in this with that accent and with that steely, cold blue stare. And it was just a really tremendous performance. It's honestly one of my favorite performances by William Sadler when it comes to his career because he just effectively carries the entire episode, which is what he has to do because he's the one of the most screen time. He's the one that's essentially narrating things. He's the one that's moving the plot along for the most part because he's breaking the fourth wall or he's narrating. The rest of the cast is fine too, like J.W. Smith as Charlie Ledbetter, the prisoner in the beginning. Roy Brocksmith is Vic, the bartender. Uh, Garrett Graham from Phantom of the Paradise and Child's Play 2 is Theodore Karn, the one of the so-called innocent people who are really guilty that Niles takes out with electricity. Um, Danny Minnick is Cynthia Baldwin, the lover of Theodore's. But yeah, the main attraction, the main focus of the film is definitely William Sadler when it comes to the cast. Another person I want to bring up is Robert Winley, who played Jimmy Flood, the biker. Um, he was in Terminator 2. He was one of the bikers in the opening sequence at the bar. I think he might have been the one that was wearing the leather jacket that Arnold was like, "Give me your boots, your jacket, and your motorcycle." Like I think that might have been the same guy. But yeah, it's a it's a it's not a bad cast. I mean, but mainly it's due to the headliner in William Sadler. The rest of the episode in terms of technical merits is also not too bad. I like the score by Ry Cooder. It definitely creates a certain atmosphere and mood for the episode that I feel works really well. It's got some good cinematography by John R. Leonetti. It's well edited by Carmel Davies. So overall, I do think that it's a good solid first run, first outing for the series and one of the better episodes of season one. Now, the second episode is called "And All Through the House." It's directed by Robert Zemeckis, featuring a script by Fred Decker. And this is the second time that this story was adapted for a film, because this whole series was shot on film. Uh, and I personally prefer this adaptation over the Amicus one. I know there are people who feel otherwise. To me, this is definitely one of the best episodes of the first season, and honestly, one of my favorite episodes of the series. It's a go-to every holiday season for me. It just does such a great job with the holiday theme, and Robert Zemeckis' direction is remarkable. He did a really good job with this, especially when it comes to maintaining tension and a good sense of pacing throughout the episode. This is an episode that has a lot that's happening, and a lot that happens in sequence, like one after another, or at times at the same time. So that's something that can be a little muddled or come across as a little too fractured with the wrong approach. And I definitely don't feel that Robert Zemeckis did really anything wrong with this. In fact, he even had William M. Gaines from EC Comics. He was actually there on the set of this, and he was the one that was egging him on to like get more reactions from the cast and to do certain things with with this episode. And that sense of easy comics signature fun and demented glee and charm is definitely on display with Zemeckis' direction in this episode. And Fred Decker's screenplay is fantastic. I think he did a really great job adapting this story. It's a very simple uh, tale about this woman who's just known as a wife who decides one holiday season, like a Christmas Eve, I've had enough of my husband. He's a deadbeat. I don't like him. I want him out of my life. I want to be with this other guy. So she decides to kill him. She kills him with a fireplace poker in the head. And while she's trying to dispose of his body, a insane maniac escapes from the local mental hospital, and he's on the loose, and he's wearing a Santa Claus suit. And the wife then becomes the next target of this deranged Santa. And so the whole setup of the episode is a lot of just Christmas stuff, like in your face in the beginning, where it makes you think like it's sort of a typical sort of Christmas story, with chestnuts roasting by the open fire and all this other Christmas imagery. And then it just goes into just pure crazy uh insane territory with its just black comedy, where all of a sudden, it just completely shatters this illusion of your typical Christmas, with the wife just stabbing the husband in the head with a fireplace poker, the daughter coming down the stairs and being like, what's wrong with daddy, what's wrong with Robert, is he okay? And the wife's like, oh, he's just sleeping, he's just tired, honey, go back to bed. Like, there's a really good sense of black comedy and dark humor in this script that Fred Dekker just really does a great job with. And when things really start to get very hairy and get very suspenseful and intense, like, it is really it's a script that really ratchets up the tension and the fear and in such a fine fashion. When the Santa turns his eyes towards the wife, or even before that, when the wife thinks that her husband is dead, but he comes back to life when she's trying to uh, dump him into the well, and he's like trying to strangle her, and she's got to try to find a way to kill him for good. Um, but yeah, the main crux of the suspense though is definitely involving the Santa, and I just love the different ways that this wife gets locked out of the house, or gets locked in a room, and she has to watch in horror as the Santa is getting closer to her, or the Santa's going up the ladder into her daughter's bedroom. uh just a very palpable sense of tension and suspense as a result. And then the ending of the episode I've always liked, where the daughter doesn't know any better. She just thinks that this is Santa, and brings Santa down the stairs, and you get the blood curdling scream from the wife as the Santa with the axe is all like, naughty, oh nice. And like yeah, I'm a huge fan of this episode. I always have been. Um, it's got a good score too by Alan Silvestri that definitely adds to the suspense. The cinematography is by Dean Cundy. I mean, the man's a legend, and his work here is no exception when it comes to his legendary career. The cast is great. Mary Ellen Trainor, may she rest in peace. Like, it's honestly one of my favorite performances from her. The way that she was able to just take these cheeky lines of dialogue and really get the most out of them, and play such a genuinely despicable, evil character, but do it in a way that's still fun to watch. And her blood curdling scream at the end that was egged on by Gaines that's one of my favorites blood curdling screams I've heard in any horror film. Like, she just nailed it. And Larry Drake, who sadly has also passed away. This is one of his better roles, playing a psycho with Santa. Even under all that makeup, like, he still brought that flair that he tends to bring to a lot of his roles. Like, you could just tell that he was having fun, having a blast playing this crazy Santa. Of course, the the fact that the Santa doesn't really say a lot of lines of dialogue just makes Drake's performance even better and even more noteworthy because of the fact that, a lot of it is just physical. It's a physical thing, or it's just kind of noises and so on and so forth. And he still finds a way to provide that performance with a lot of character and personality, despite the fact that there's not really a lot of dialogue. And of course, you also got Marsha Bell, who plays the husband. He's fine. As is Lindsay Whitney Berry as the daughter, Carrie Ann. Um, but yeah, great episode. Um, the third episode is Dig That Cat, He's Real Gone, which is another one of my favorites. Another one that I think is one of the better episodes of season one, and one of the better episodes of the series in general. It's directed by Richard Donner. And Richard Donner, at this point, he was already a well-established veteran filmmaker. And you could definitely tell that when it comes to the way that this episode is shot. I love the just off-kilter, crazed demeanor that this direction has. This direction is very zany, and it's a very over the top episode. And I think for some people that might be a turnoff, but I love it. I love how he directs this. It's so comic book infused, and I genuinely feel that it's incredible. And I think that the script by Terry Black is also another thing that's absolutely terrific about this episode. It's another instance of a more humorous and more comical episode, but this is actually genuinely funny. Like, it's got some really funny bits, some just really charming and just tongue-in-cheek moments, and I really like the dark comedy in this. It's a very dark comic storyline anyway, about this guy named Ulrich who was homeless, and there's this scientist who finds him and decides to make him an experiment. And he does so by taking a certain gland in a cat's brain and surgically attaching it to his brain so that he theoretically can have the 9 lives of a cat. And of course, that leads to Ulrich and this doctor going into business with this circus, the circus act, and this ringleader, so they can make a profit, make money off of this guy dying. And it's a genuinely screwed in the head concept when you think about it, but it's very well executed, very well done when it comes to this script. And despite the fact that Ulrich and, the doctor and all these other people are just, despicable and kind of, a bunch of jerk offs, and it's another one of those stories where there's not really a lot of people in it that are like really good people or good guys or good gals. They're either double crossing you or they're doing other sort of shady stuff. I feel bad for the Barker, though, the Carnival Barker, because he's just getting taken advantage of the entire time. But it's one of those episodes that, despite all of that, it's still enjoyable. It's still so much fun to watch because of the really well done comic timing, the dialogue, and just the overall variety of the different ways that Ulrich dies. And yeah, the twist is kind of predictable when you think about it, but I still think it works, and I still think it's pretty effective overall. I don't think it's a twist that doesn't work, despite the fact that it is a little bit predictable. In these kind of stories, these kind of twists kind of are predictable. It's more about the journey to the twist at the end than necessarily the twist itself that makes these stories work. And I feel the journey is definitely worth it because of just how well it creates this just demented carnival barker uh wet dream, so to speak, involving, the ultimate attraction. Like, hey, you're a struggling carnival, struggling circus act. Like, what's a bigger circus act than a guy defying death, literally? And the cast is great. I think this is a really good cast, especially Joe Pantoliano as Ulrich. It's one of my favorite performances, honestly, from him and his career. The guy, you kind of feel from a little bit initially early on when he's taken advantage of by this doctor who just does an experiment on him, and but then as his fame grows, he becomes a genuine asshole, and Pontellano just nails that aspect of him, but does a good job playing a character that, yeah, he's an asshole, but you love to hate him. And Robert Wool plays just a great, a lot of ways, kind of a sad sack kind of character. And the Barker who just gets taken advantage of rather easily. He's very gullible. But Robert Wool still adds a certain charm and fun to the performance. And at times he can be kind of a dick too, especially when it comes to some of his exchanges with some of the people who are maybe considering taking part in killing Ulrich, but then he's like, "Oh, you don't have the money? All right, sorry, move along." Uh um but yeah, Robert Wool, he 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 says like the word resurrection, what it feels like a million times, but he does it with such enthusiasm that it's honestly kind of endearing to me. Overall, yeah, I like his performance in this. I also like Kathleen York as Coralie, the girl that Ulrich falls for, who then ultimately double crosses him in the end and stabs him and takes all his money. Gustav Vintas, who plays the mad doctor, Dr. Emil Manfred. Yeah, overall, good cast. You even have Rick Zumwalt, Bull Harley from Over the Top. He's even in this as one of the workers, like a guy who works for the circus and helped bury Ulrich for his final act. And it's got some good music by Nicholas Pike. Cinematography by Richard Bowen is also really good. I want to mention the editing by Stephen Kemper because I really think it just adds such a different sort of flavor and feel to the episode. It's the kind of editing that I think some people might find to be a bit annoying, but I like it because I think it just adds to that madcap nature of the episode in terms of how some certain scenes repeat themselves or there's a lot of quick cuts, but I still think it works. It's not something that I think detracts from the episode when it comes to other things that I've seen when it comes to that kind of editing. The next episode, episode 4, is Only Sin Deep. This one's directed by Howard Dutch. I think his direction is decent. This is like the first time where the direction just kind of, it didn't pop as much. Like, it's decent, it's fine. I would say it's at its best when it comes to the scenes that take place like at night on the side of the street when Leah Thompson's character is trying to make a living as a hooker, and maybe some of the stuff that takes place in the pawn shop. But a lot of the other stuff, like at the party scene or the montage when Sylvia is trying on all these clothes, like the direction and just the way those scenes were set up, it looked very network TV kind of thing. Like, it looked like syndicated television type of direction. Howard Dutch is also more of a director who's known for his comedy work. So I think that probably came into play here. He's done some drama stuff like Some Kind of Wonderful and Pretty in Pink, but he's done a lot of comedy, The Great Outdoors and so on and so forth. So this wasn't really entirely his wheelhouse, and it kind of shows. But then you could also argue that Robert Zemeckis' wheelhouse is in horror, but he had a certain passion for this because he loves Tales from the Crypt, so you could definitely see that in the episode. Howard Dutch kind of seemed like he was more just a hired gun. And so that's the result that you get here. Like I said, it's decent. It's fine. But I don't think it's genuinely like fantastic or on the same level as some of the other directors who worked on this series, let alone this first season. Um the cast is decent. The script by Fred Decker. I'll get to the cast after I talk about the script here. The screenplay is by Fred Decker, and I think his script in and All Through the House is a lot better. This screenplay, I think there's only so much he can do with the subject matter because it's just a whole thing about this vain woman who decides to sell her beauty so she can get money so then she can marry this rich guy and end her life on the street. And then she's also kind of a dunce because and a ditz because she doesn't remember the deadline to get her beauty back, so then she starts to age super quickly and becomes essentially an old prune. And then she goes back, got the ticket to get her beauty back. She's a day late. The guy who runs the pawn shop, he's like, "All right, I'll give you your beauty back if you give me like a certain exorbitant amount of money." And so she decides to steal it from her husband or fiance, because I don't know if they got married just yet, and kills him. But then she leaves the gun behind like a total dumbass, and that's to set up things for the twist at the end where, oh, you got the money and I can give you your beauty back, but are you sure you want that? Because now you're wanted. Your face is on wanted papers. Your face is all over the newspapers, and if you show up anywhere, they'll arrest you, probably go to jail and get the death penalty. And so she just decides not to get her beauty back and stays this old wrinkled hag. And you're just like, yeah, all right. I get what they're going for, but there's only so much you can do with this story to make it anything other than generic. Because this has kind of been there, done that kind of tale of vanity. Then you have episode 5, Lover Come Hack to Me, directed by Tom Holland, who did Fright Night and Child's Play. And this, honestly, to me, is a gem. I think this is a really underrated episode, not only from the first season, but in general. I see a lot of people rank this pretty low or say that it's worse than Only Sin Deep or worse than Collection Completed. And I honestly think this is I would say probably my third favorite episode of the first season, but it's still up there because I think it's a great episode. I think Tom Holland in particular did a tremendous job directing it. It's the eeriest episode of the first season when it comes to its visuals. It's very eerie in the way that it's shot, in terms of the way that he works with the camera angles, a lot of low shots and a few high angle shots here and there. Some really good wide shots and establishing shots in this episode. Does a great job bringing this old dark house to life and handling the apparition sequences and just all the blood. Like, this is a very bloody episode. I would say this is the bloodiest episode and the goriest episode of the first season. And there's buckets of blood in this episode. And I just the way that Holland shot the sequences involving all of the blood, I thought was very stylish and just made it all the more chilling and honestly pretty unnerving. And like, I would say this is the episode from the first season that gets under my skin the most. And it definitely helps that you got Michael McDowell who wrote the script. And Michael McDowell, he did Clue and Beetlejuice, and he does some really good work here. It deals with this family tradition where you have this family where there would be a daughter who would decide to get married, and she would want things to be perfect. She would want a baby girl who's this big, and she wants to have a great, wonderful, lovely night of sex with her lover, with their husband, but she wants to keep it that way so it doesn't get poisoned and doesn't get destroyed by time. And so it's a family tradition to, in order to keep it that way, you kill the husband right after you have sex, and the girl has been impregnated. And it's such a demented concept and overall plot, but it's very well done. I think Michael McDowell did a really marvelous job with it, especially when it comes to just establishing the family legacy, setting up this very surreal nature of the episode where you're not quite sure what is reality and what's an apparition or what's a dream, and just the dialogue that he gives Peggy, and the apparition of her aunt, or Peggy's mother, uh, and how the two correlate with one another and how they align, and just the way that the dialogue is set up, especially with Peggy, is genuinely creepy. And there's also a bit of dark comedy too, in terms of the husband, in terms of how he just isn't hiding anything when it comes to his true intentions. Like, he genuinely did just marry Peggy for her money. Um and he was even willing to shoot her on their wedding night, in this old dark house, but he gets outsmarted in the end, with by Peggy and her giant axe. And I get why some people maybe aren't super big on this, because it is a very sex focused episode, but I never felt it was that sleazy. Actually, I felt the sex scenes, they were shot and they were written rather tastefully. Um and I thought that it was well paced. I thought the story was engaging because of the whole, is it a dream, is it not? And the whole mystery of what's going on with Peggy, and like, is she really going to do what this ghost did, and is she going to kill her husband and in the same way, and I thought it had a good payoff. I thought a great payoff, very bloody payoff, but it was definitely one that left an impact, so to speak. The cast, I think, is great. I think it's a really strong cast, headed by Amanda Plummer, who I thought was awesome. I thought she was amazing as Peggy. It was a role that could have come across as very corny if you didn't have the right approach to the performance, and I felt that Amanda had the right approach with it. Uh, just the way that she handled everything, like, it was so sincere but also so chilling and disturbing at the same time. Stephen Shellen, he plays a great asshole. He always has. He's a very underrated character actor when it comes to playing like just a total jerk off, and does a great job here playing this guy Charles, who married Peggy for her money and just doesn't really give a shit. Like, he just comes across like he's just a total douchebag, but that's the whole point. And he does such a good job playing it that it just comes across so naturally. And he has this certain charm and charisma about it too, that you can't help but love to hate him. Um and then you got Lisa Figus, who plays Aunt Edith, who's also fine. Richard Eden, RoboCop from RoboCop the series, who plays Alan, the doomed husband of Peggy's mother during the apparition or nightmare sequence. Um, but really, it's Amanda Plummer and Stephen Shellen who are the main performers here, and they both really do a good job. The score is by Joe Renzetti, who did the score for Child's Play. I think it's a good score. Not particularly memorable, but it fits really well with the episode. And that's some good cinematography by Jeffrey Jurger and some equally good editing by Andrew London. So, and genuinely some good practical effects at the end in terms of the gore. Um, the last episode of season 1 is collection completed. This one's directed by Mary Lambert. It's got a script by 3 different writers: A. Whitney Brown, Battle Davis, and Randolph Davis. This is one of my least favorite episodes in the entire series, and not just season 1. I know it has its fans, to each their own. I've always felt this is an incredibly forgettable episode. The tone of it is way too tame for Tales from the Crypt for me. This is more like a Tales from the Dark Side, monsters kind of episode, or 80s Twilight Zone kind of thing. The idea of the episode involving an older man who retires from his job, and then he comes home and his wife is so used to having all these pets around that she treats him like she's one of her pets, and that drives the husband mad. Okay, there's something with that. But Mary Lambert's direction, I don't really think is that great. I think she did a lot better work in Pet Cemetery and other projects that she's done in the past, or even after this. Like, the direction is I honestly thought it was just kind of lackadaisical. It was just kind of, and it just kind of just going through the motions at times. Not really a lot of visual flair or style. Just almost sitcom level when it comes to the direction in this episode by Lambert. And I mean, it's kind of fitting because the writing is sitcom level with its humor and with the setups, and it's a twisted idea at the end, in the end, where the husband, Jonas, after he is unable to find something in the past at the time because he has all this free time now that he's retired, and he can't pass the time making models or doing yard work because he's not good at either of those things. He decides to become a taxidermist. So he starts creating taxidermy creations out of his wife's pets. So he goes after Anita's babies and creates these taxidermy creations. But a lot of it just happens off screen, which is understandable. I get it. But you don't really see a lot of the taxidermy creations, and when you do see them, they're honestly pretty fake looking. Like the one of Jonas the bulldog with the light up eyes, like that was not a very convincing looking effect. And then you get like to the end of the episode, and Anita predictably snaps because Jonas is taking all of her babies and all of her animals except for this one cat, and he's gonna turn it into his next project to collect his to complete his collection, so to speak. And then she just snaps and hits him in the head with a hammer, and then he's turned into a taxidermy puppet or creation at the end by Anita. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's fine, but like it's an okay looking effect too when Jonas is all taxidermied, but it doesn't really leave a lasting imprint. And I've tried to watch this episode numerous times and see what people see in this episode, but it just doesn't really work that well for me. It's just very forgettable and bland. It's not scary either, so that's another thing. Like, it doesn't have really any palpable sense of tension or terror or horror about it. It's very tongue in cheek and very campy. So, and I know Tales from the Crypt can be campy, but this is like ultra camp. I think there's too much camp to the point where it genuinely becomes cheesy. And the performances are kind of the same thing. Like, Emmett Walsh, I think he's a really underrated character actor. This is not one of my favorite performances of his because he's just kind of hamming it up too much. And the director just seemed to encourage that. Same thing for Anita, played by Audra Lindley. And also, I didn't really buy the chemistry between the two of them. So that made the whole thing with the couple bit just kind of fall flat. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this episode. I don't even like the music by Nicholas Pike. The cinematography by Peter Stein isn't really much. So yeah, I thought it was a weak finale to the first season. Um, but overall, I think the first season is relatively strong. Like, even like the weakest episode is still better than some of the weaker anthology segments I've seen in some horror anthologies. There's a lot to like about this first season. I genuinely do feel it was a good start to the series. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of season 1 of Tales from the Crypt, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.